Hey everyone, this is Alex. I am the founder and the host of Tiger Talk podcast. Um, I'm just a sports fan like you, specifically an LSU fan, Louisiana girl, um, through and through. And I give a lot of credit to my dad. He was a equipment manager for LSU football from 1985 to 1988. So I grew up with my dad, just like probably many of you, going to LSU football games, and that history and the tradition of what LSU is being taught to me. Tailgating, I was there when, memorable moments now that you look back on, when Nick Saban was the head coach for Alabama and he returned to Baton Rouge. The first game he played in Baton Rouge as a head coach for Alabama, I was there. Never forget that tailgating experience and so much memorable experience. I have a family in Baton Rouge, and so, like I said, just like y'all, I have a passion for LSU football, specifically the SEC in general. But I am not going to keep anyone very long, but so many people on social media, what a whirlwind has it been for LSU football this past month. It seems longer than that, to be honest with you. It seems longer than that since they fired Brian Kelly, since they fired Scott Woodward, since we didn't have a president. We didn't even have, just, man, such a blur, to be honest with you. And at the same time, it does feel like it was yesterday. And also, at the same time, it doesn't. So, I digress. I'm not going to come up in here and say that I have all these in depth, deep sources, because I don't. I'm just an LSU girl who loves LSU, not just football, but baseball, softball, soccer, basketball, men and women's, volleyball, swimming, every LSU sport that they play on campus. I'm a massive fan of. I love LSU. I love Louisiana State University as a school, as an institution. So I'm not going to come up here and say, according to my sources, and then nothing's happened. You've seen that all over social media. This is just my take. This is just my opinion on, through my eyes of the coaching search, who I would want for the head coach of LSU football and moving forward with all of that. If you want to listen to other podcasts that has much more in-depth details, please go ahead. One podcast I listen to, and I can get a lot of flack for it, but is Blake Ruffino with AYS. Love him, hate him. He does admit when he's wrong, but there's been very few times when he has been wrong, and he goes in-depth into every single thing. So I encourage you, there's much more podcasts out there if you want a more in-depth look at things. My podcast is very chill, very laid back. And you're more than welcome to also create your own podcast. So, I digress. I think it's crucial, though, in order, everyone wants to talk, of course, Lane Kiffin. And I'll go into my opinion on him here in a minute. Everyone wants to talk about Lane Kiffin. And everyone wants to talk about the future. I will say this. At the time, this is not me defending Brian Kelly. This is just how I look at things. At the time when Scott Woodward hired Brian Kelly, I do believe that that was a good hire at the time. Times have changed, and there is no progress, and us just getting, not just that we lost to Texas A&M, but how we lost to Texas A&M, unexcusable. LSU is called the Cathedral College football for a reason. And then you go out and lose like that. that is just unacceptable. It's just unacceptable. With that being said, a lot of people want Coach O back. That's not going to happen. I respect Coach O, what he did, just lightning in a bottle. He's a great coach. But he did, no pun intended, fumble the opportunity that LSU has given him. Scott Woodward, I believe at the time, made the right decision with hiring Brian Kelly at that time. And then times changed. And there is no progress at all. And progress we did see under Heisman-winning quarterback Jayden Daniels. I think Jayden Daniels really cloaked a lot of the deep-rooted issues, deep-seated issues that LSU had. Stubbornness on Brian Kelly's era was huge. That's not going to get you anywhere. In life, in coaching, in your job, stubbornness, unwilling to adapt and change. I do believe that was one of Brian Kelly's Achilles heels. Scott Woodward, I do highly respect for making the decision of hiring Jay Johnson, an absolute dynasty hire, honestly. An absolute dynasty hire. I tweeted, and all links will be in the description, but I tweeted last year in January, really looking at last year's team, and I said, bookmark it. LSU men's baseball is going to go back to Omaha and win the national championship, and that happened. And this coming up year, Jay is so good at overly recruiting. That's how my dad put it, and I love how he put it. He is so good at overly recruiting, but that man lives, breathes baseball, and he has such a baseball savant mind, if that's the right word to say, and he sets the standard. He really does, and there's no reason why LSU baseball should not be going back to Omaha this coming up year, and that is definitely a bucket list thing for me to do, is to go to Omaha. With that being said, Scott Woodward did make some great hires, but how he laid out the contract extension of Brian Kelly in general, 10-year contracts truly need to stop unless it's Nick Saban walking through that door. But that's a whole different conversation. I can care less what your politics are. I am not a registered Democrat, nor am I a registered Republican. But one thing I do agree with is sticking with true facts. And the fact is, Governor Jeff Landry said the buyouts need to be stopped being so ridiculously high, and the contracts need to stop being so long. And I'm totally paraphrasing, but you know what? I absolutely 100% agree. There is no reason for buyouts to be that ginormously expensive, and signing Brian Kelly to 10 years, it should have, in my opinion, only been 4 to 5. That is what I agree with the governor on, and that is it. You are more than welcome to have your own opinions. Moving forward, the absolute debacle after Brian Kelly getting fired. And see, I think a lot of people, and I am guilty for it for one, is a lot of people thought, okay, Brian Kelly got fired, then it fixes all things. But I think Brian Kelly getting fired was an absolute just domino. It was the main domino. It was the main catalyst to see the house of cards fall at LSU. I mean, in the second quarter, when LSU was losing that football game against Texas A&M and fans emptied out the stadium, and I absolutely agree, I would too. Especially making that trip. I did not from the 318, but all my family's in South Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Plaquemine, Belle Chase. But I currently live in South Texas. So a drive for me to get to Baton Rouge would be 8+ hours. I would be mad too. That was an unacceptable performance. And it all went back to coaching. It all went back to coaching, and I'm pretty sure there's more deeper into it, but I'm not going to get into those details. But it absolutely went back to coaching. It was an embarrassing on how they lost. Embarrassed on how they lost. And just Tiger Stadium at night being completely taken over by Texas A&M fans. Disgusted. And I remember watching it on my couch here in my apartment and being in utter disbelief. It felt like Rome was falling. It felt like a dynasty and empire was falling, and I was at a loss for words. And to be honest with you, I'm still at a loss for words. But moving forward, it needed to be done after that horrendous loss against A&M. And just the diabolical debacle, tongue twister there, of how everything was handled afterwards. You had the governor getting involved. Then you had the governor going on national media outlets like the Pat McAfee show, which I'm a major fan of Pat McAfee. That is not the point. You had a lot of egos into play. You had a lot of Louisiana politics into play. And honestly, when is LSU not intertwined with Louisiana politics? Should it be that way? In my personal opinion, no. It shouldn't. But one thing in Louisiana you don't mess with. You don't mess with football season, Mardi Gras, crawfish, and our families and our churches in Jesus Christ, if you are a believer, in my personal opinion. But with that being said, so many egos in the room who at the end of the day just wanted a power trip, in my personal opinion. You hire interim coach Frank Wilson, which, huge side note, massive legend, lives, breathes LSU, a man, praise the Lord, a strong man in his leadership skills, his communication skills. Man, I just love his press conferences. So clear cut, so precise. Brian Kelly was filled with a lot of car salesman like jargon, very political, soft answers. If I'm honest with you, Frank Wilson came in and was the absolute man for the hour with being the interim head coach and him winning his first game as head coach against Arkansas, even though it was only by 1 point. Listen, the boot stays in the boot. So, to me, that's a win. Anytime LSU wins a football game is a win to me, period. And so, LSU didn't have a sitting president. LSU then fired their AD. You have the governor going on national you have the governor going on national sports talk shows. And men in power making an absolute buffoon of themselves. It was embarrassing. Because at the end of the day, I'm of the opinion politics stays in its lane. Football needs to stay in its lane. They need to get it together. Then you had Verge come in as acting AD. Then it was announced that he was the AD. And then you had a new president come for LSU. And it finally looked like there's going to be alignment. And then you had the president say some misleading words regarding your AD and then that debacle. But at the end of the day, it was a horrible alignment issue. Lack of communication. And finally now it seems like everything's finally in the row of what it should be. Period. And LSU needs to put on a strong front of alignment. LSU needs to put a strong front of keeping the egos at bay. But honestly, we'll see if that even happens. And they need to hire a football coach that's going to make LSU dominant again. Because that's 100% possible. A lot of people say we need an LSU football coach who is from Louisiana. I think Coach O example was like lightning in a bottle. That does not discredit his great coaching abilities. But it being a culture thing. Guys, Les Miles was not a Louisiana man. Nick Saban was not a Louisiana man. I can care less about culture. What I want is a leader of men, a man that is a football savant, a man that lives, breathes baseball like lives and breathes football like Coach Jay Johnson does baseball, and like Kim Mulkey does basketball, and go out and be in the playoffs every single year. I do agree with Verge on that. LSU football needs to be in the playoffs every single year. Period. And at the end of the day, LSU needs to have a leader of men. Everyone's talking about Lane Kiffin, and I'm not against Lane Kiffin whatsoever. I'm not. I want him. But if I can write a blank check, it would be Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo. Fangirling, massive fan of Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo. Kirby Smart, such a football savant. Of course, he learned under Nick Saban, and he threw it back all the way to 2003, 2004, when Nick Saban was the head coach for LSU. Kirby Smart was on his staff, and Will Muschamp. I love how Kirby Smart coaches Georgia football. That's the type of man that I want coaching LSU football. Kirby Smart recently just said something in press conference yesterday after his Bulldogs won against Texas. And be honest with you, I absolutely agree with it. And I think, I know that whoever the next head football coach of LSU is needs to have the exact same mentality. So I'm going to go ahead and play it. And, you tell me.
Yeah, it's the approach we take. We're gonna dominate and try to win the fourth quarter. It's what we do in practice. It's what we do in the off season. It's what we build our core culture around, is being a more physical team. And you have to recruit physical players, and they have to buy into that process. I don't know that a lot of these kids nowadays, they want to check. They don't want physicality. And if you have the check and no physicality, you end up with nothing. So we're not just getting checks at our place. We're hitting people.
And I absolutely agree with that. The world in the NIL, I'm not against players getting paid whatsoever. I absolutely agree with it for players being paid. But I need LSU football to be physical. And there was a time where it was absolutely just physical. Craig Stelz, Leonard Fournette just running through people, Alfred Blue, Jacob Hester, just hard-nosed football. The man that they hire for LSU football needs to have that mentality, in my opinion. Everyone wants Lane Kiffin right now. I was really confident when LSU made the announcement that they fired Brian Kelly that it would be Lane Kiffin. But honestly, we don't know. And if I'm brutally honest, he may go to Florida. He may stay at Ole Miss. He very well could be staying at Ole Miss. And I wouldn't blame him for that. So LSU needs to just not have tunnel vision and focus on one man, because every football department across the country, it seems that they want Lane Kiffin. And only Lane Kiffin knows what he's going to do. So LSU needs to not have tunnel vision and truly look at these other names on the list. LSU is a brand. LSU is a brand internationally. I wear my LSU stuff all the time here in South Texas, even though I'm surrounded by Texas Longhorn fans and A&M fans. I wear my LSU gear everywhere. Everywhere. People know it's Louisiana State University. And at the end of the day, we can get back to that. LSU football is called the Cathedral College football. We need a coach that truly understands that, a coach that can truly recruit, a coach that can truly use their God-given brain and put a great, phenomenal coaching staff together. It can be done. But you have the keys to the Ferrari, baby, if you're the head coach of LSU football. Can't just be doing it for the paycheck. That's what Brian Kelly did. It can't be for any other selfish motive but to build a freaking dynasty and leave a legacy. Period. And build a legacy for these young men coming in to your program, whether they're straight out of high school or a transfer, molding them into young men on the football field and off the football field. And let's go out and win some national championships, because we're LSU. We're the Fighting Tigers. We're Louisiana State University, and we're going to punch some people in the mouth metaphorically and leave it all on this field. Blood, sweat, tears, I don't care. I'm not going to say this next generation is soft, but again, I 100% agree with what Kirby Smart said. I think the reputation of these men, Verge, the president, the board of supervisors, and maybe even the governor, is all on this next hire, whether they like it or not. And they need to put egos inside and be like, what is best for LSU? Because LSU is a national brand. You look at Joe Burrow, Jane Daniels, Dylan Cruz, Paul Skeens, Livy Dunn, Angel Reese, Flau'jae Johnson, Jared Jones. The list goes on and on. Kim Mulkey. You come to LSU and you win, you'll be a legend forever. Get LSU back to dominance. Get LSU back to dynasty. Get LSU back to physicality. Get LSU back to playing hard-nosed, hardcore Bayou football. And that's all I care about. All right, guys. Thank you so much. All my links are in the description. So just check it out. Until next time.